All right, hello everyone, welcome back. This short video is just going to walk you through, should you want more analysis, more modeling for your first paper, walk you through my half paper, where I'm doing an identical thing to what I'm asking you to do. I'm just doing it on Save the Whales, Screw the Shrimp, and again, you'll be doing it on the Sierra Club documents. That is these documents. Here's one of my favorite. Remember, you only need to use 2 of these. Even 1 would be just fine. You've got a choice from 5. One of my favorites, very comedic, even though it's not all comedic, through here, as well as this one, this one, this one, and this one. All of them offering all these various forms of rhetoric that we've talked about. You're looking for patterns, right, which is what we talked about in the past. These can be found online, of course, as a grouping on D2L on our homepage. All right, so what's happening here? You want to look at your assignment description one more time. I tell you what to put into your introductory paragraph. Basically, you want to talk about probably who the Sierra Club is, the purpose of these documents, the historical moment at which the Grand Canyon was about to be dammed, and then that you're going to analyze the rhetoric to see why it was likely successful, right? Remember, you're working with the Sierra Club is one way to imagine this, and you're analyzing the success of these documents and the strategies they used. So all that will wind up with something that will be a thesis. This is still academic writing. Now we're going to switch back to what I wrote on Save the Whales. And my basic thing I took away was for reasons based in human commercial values, not ecological values. Now notice if we just want to look at one major thing, connecting everything back to the thesis, you see that at some point in each paragraph. In this first paragraph, we'll see that pretty quick, but maybe we'll talk about a few other things. Here is a good definition. As I pointed out earlier, this has to be followed fairly quickly by, and we know we're looking for these things to make this great land safe for the string bean and corn, right, is the ecologically safe preserve, actually works against ecological interest in the favor of commercial interests. So here's my topic sentence. I've got the definition first and then getting into my topic sentence that ties back to my thesis, right? After that, I get my much larger example that I pull from Williams right here. And then, of course, I have to explain this quote, right? Here, in this quote, the irony, this is the why or the how, right? Here, the irony is that to protect nature, animals must be killed. So I gave the what, right? And that could just be seen as the thesis, and all things that restate the thesis in each paragraph. The what is, for reasons of our human commercial values, we often overlook ecological values, right? So that is the what. But why or how it happens is explained instance by instance as we go through. And you'll see that right here, explaining how the irony works. That usually has to come after the example. It could come before the example quote. Typically, I tend to do it after you set it up a little bit and say what the reader should look for. And that is that this idea that commercial interests override ecological interests is the basic thing you want your reader to see going into the quote. And then on the back half, you can do the deeper explanation, in this case, how the irony works. And this is a real basic pattern I teach in all my writing classes. Here's the thing you want to remember about research writing or using quotes or paraphrase. You've got to tell the reader what to see or they won't see it. You don't want to just slap a quote in there and make me guess about what you want me to see. You want me to see this very specific thing, the thesis in this case, or this instance of the thesis, that ecological interests are overridden in favor of commercial interests. Once I know that, I'm going to start to, on my own, even without you telling me late in the paragraph, see what you want me to see as your reader, right? Of course, you need to do the good job of explaining it too, so that you definitely don't lose your reader and they take your point, right? All right. One other thing I'm doing here that ties things back to our course for this rhetorical analysis, as I'm pointing out the different discourse communities. I've got consumers and commercial interests, ecological interests, I've got the government, I've got ranchers. So I tried to be pretty specific, both for the context of this paragraph and because our course concentrates on discourse communities and publics. So that's a nice thing to do. If you did that, I would be pleased. That would be great. As we go, we want to do basically the same things, but also we want to differentiate later examples from previous examples. So again, here we see commercial thinking ironically turns animals into products. That's the commercial thing. I see that again here. This use of irony too centers on our commercial mindset. So I'm really setting that up and it sandwiches what, and I'm telling you what I want you to see, and it sandwiches the quote, "We eat a burger now and then, but burgers are hardly cows after all." Right? Now, what I want to do for in this case is explain how it's the same, and I've basically done that by connecting it back to the thesis, another example, but explain how it's different at some point. And so that's my job in the back half of the paragraph, right? That compare-contrast move that I list up above right here, C as it turns out to be. So you can see I've underlined it for you so you can see it. The difference from the first example is that Williams showed the irony of helping nature by killing it in the first example. That is, the physical actions in the world of the government would seem to be ironic no matter how it's explained. You don't have to be ironic in your explanation. Trying to save something by killing it, helping nature by killing nature, is ironic in itself, right? In the burger example, though, I thought it was more on not physical actions, but mental states. That would be one way to think of it. How we feel about eating burgers and calling it a burger, rather than saying I'm eating a cow, right? Which distances us from nature. And so that's what I'm getting at here. So I try to show how the two examples were different and how the uses of irony were different, or treating a different subject. And that helps me develop my paragraph, gives me a lot more to say, right? And articulates my critical thinking a little bit more. Third example, of course, going to do the same thing. How the language of consumption masks our unecological actions. That is my tie right back again to my thesis. Commercial over the ecological, right? And that's a major point of Save the Whales. You'll have to figure out what your major point is for the Grand Canyon documents, right? What is it? Or how is it that you are interpreting these? What does Sierra Club want? Right? So you might need to look at what is their major argument. Why should we save Grand Canyon? They probably have a number of reasons, or maybe one big one. You don't want to pick that. That'll be your thesis, equivalent to what I've underlined up here, that all later paragraphs, regardless of what you talk about, the rhetorical device, irony or personification or dystopian rhetoric, ethos, whatever, pathos, whatever it might be, you will want to bring it back to this one thing that they see as values. This is the author's values. The author for you, of course, is Sierra Club. There's no specific person that wrote it, we'll say. All right, anyway, so all that leads to our third paragraph. I'm doing the same moves to tie back to the thesis. I'm setting things up so I tell people what to see inside of here. This time I'm saying this example, I could say here if I wanted to, of irony, if I just want to not lose my reader, even though I set it up here, is not based in physical actions or mental states, the first paragraph, the second paragraph. I'm setting up my third example as something the same, ironic, example of irony, yet new at the same time. Rather, this example, she points out that people, organizations, or consumers use scientific or agricultural language to mask their overconsumption of a food resource. Overconsumption being against, ecological balance, of course. So I tell my reader again what to look for before they go into the quote in very specific terms. That way I can guarantee that they will see it. Okay, and again, that's not for this assignment or this course, but for every time you use a quote, every time you repurpose somebody else's information, a source, tell your reader what to look for before they go into the quote, and they will see it. And you'll have a much easier time explaining things in the back half of your paragraph because they're already halfway there. By telling them what to look for, they saw it. Now you just need to explain it and reference it, right? Things become confusing if you don't tell them what to look for because there's a whole lot of nouns inside of any given quote. If we look at this one, how could you confuse a reader? Since this is a writing class, we'll talk about this briefly. Sometimes you don't feel like eating all you can. Well, if I didn't know what to look for, I might think this is the thing that this paragraph's going to be about. But it's not, right? It's about the use of language, of harvesting, using sort of scientific or agricultural language to mask our overconsumption. So any noun could be an idea that we concentrate on for this paragraph. You need to tell me, the reader, which one you want me to look at so that I do look at it when I read. Or I'm a little bit lost in your quote and I don't know what to focus on, what you're going to analyze. So take that as a way for all writing for the rest of your life. That's an easy way to handle quotes and to control how your reader reads. You're actually controlling their cognition at that point, right? What they're thinking about, which is what good writers do. All right, so you can see all the other moves in there that I've covered, mentioning the communities and the publics, explaining how the irony works in this example, right? Thus, people are fooling themselves purposely with their language. We use the term harvest to signify an action, unlike traditional harvest, but rather that is overconsumption, right? And then what you want to do at some point, I just did mine at the end so you could see it separate from the others. You could say something like this at the beginning, but you want to gather up how the three examples are the same. I provided the examples to my reader. I showed how they're different, even though they're all examples of irony. Now I want to make them seem the same. I could say this at the beginning to prep my reader. I could gather it up at the end. I could kind of divvy this work out paragraph by paragraph, but that might be too much. So I've chosen as a writer to save it for the end and say that regardless of the differences, they all have the same basic thing, that they drive back toward my thesis, my pretend thesis here, which is that we're distorting ecological values through commercial values. So this very thing I've underlined pops up again here at the end of my analysis of the three examples. And so that's a lot of writing. That's probably like 2 to 2.5 pages right there. And I still would have one example to go were I you writing on the Sierra Club documents. So there you go. There's the modeling right there. All right. I think we'll leave off right there. There's a lot more we could say about these things and the importance of them, but just tuck these away. You will get to use these again on your second paper, and I hope that you remember them for future writings beyond this course as well. All right, thank you, everyone. We will see you soon. The last thing I should mention, this document, this sample is online as mentioned. It is called, for sake of ease, Save the Whales Sample Paragraphs of Rhetorical Analysis. You'll find it listed on our D2L homepage. All right. So just so you can find that easily. I would have this open, be looking at it, maybe even be watching the video as you write the paper, especially in the later stages when you start to actually cast things into language and organize your paragraphs. All right. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.